Hi, everybody. It's Ashley of Day-to-Day Social Work. I'm a private online tutor and I specialize in assisting people to pass a license exam in social work on the master's and bachelor's level. You can find me online at Day-to-Day Social Work on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. So today we're going to do a Sunday social, and I have one of my very close friends here today to talk about. We're going to talk about homelessness and ministry, but we're going to talk about it, I guess, on a macro level and a micro level, from my experience and then from his experience as a minister. So I'm going to let you introduce yourself.
Yes, indeed. My name is Jonathan R. Whitfield. I'm an ordained reverend here in Atlanta, Georgia, and I work a lot with the homeless.
Okay. So what I wanted to do, and y'all have heard me talk over and over and over about my job that I worked in grad school, working with the transitional housing program for the homeless. And so I wanted to get Jonathan to come and talk to us today because he lives in a larger city. So I was in Columbia, South Carolina, working in a transitional housing program. So as we all know, there are different definitions for homelessness. So a lot of people think that if you're homeless, it just means that you're living on the street. The people that we see downtown with signs and that kind of thing. But actually, homelessness is a lot more than that. So when we look at the HUD definition of homelessness, and HUD is the Housing and Urban Development. Is it development or department? I think it's development. I think it might be department, but HUD.
Put it on the screen.
Right. So y'all look it up. As I always say, make sure you look everything up and don't just take my word for it. But HUD is basically the Housing and Urban Development or department for the country. It's a federal program. So according to HUD's definition, you could be homeless living on the street. You could be homeless doubled up, as they call it. It could be two families in a household. So it could be a couple generations in a household. Anybody who doesn't have a permanent address, anybody who is living in a hotel, those kind of things. So homelessness is not just living on the street. So we should know that if we've listened to any of my videos, time and time again, I always talk about that. But the people that I worked with who were homeless were in a transitional period. So they were homeless even though they were housed, but they were transitioning back into self-sufficiency. So that's what I'm used to, is working with people who are not necessarily on the streets, but who are in a transitional period and doing case management, doing a treatment plan to help them come up with goals to reach self-sufficiency, and teaching them budgeting and life skills and parenting sometimes, or referring them out to different resources. So I think as a social worker, and Jonathan's not a social worker, he's an ordained, he's in ministry. But of course, they also do what we do sometimes as social workers. So from my perspective, we're more focused in the case management role on, like I said, treatment plans, helping people to learn to become self-sufficient by home buying classes, budgeting, and that kind of thing. But when people are more in those metropolitan areas, it's a whole lot different than, it's a whole lot different than what we see in a structured program. So can you tell us a little bit about what you've experienced with the homeless population in Atlanta?
Sure. From my experience with the homeless population in Atlanta, for me, it was shell-shocking because I'm actually from South Carolina, a very small town. And Bennettsville, South Carolina. So my master's program at the Interdenominational Theological Center, part of my concentration is counseling. So we had to be put on the streets into shelters, women facilities, children's facilities, and things like that. And so I chose to go into shelters and homelessness, So when I first got there, my first day they put us on the street and we were providing meals for the homeless. We don't like to say feeding the homeless because it sounds like we feeding ducks. We like to humanize people.
Right.
So we like to say providing meals for the homeless. And I might slip up and say feeding anyway, so work with me.
And we always talk about language here as social workers, like people first language. So people who are homeless instead of saying homeless people and that kind of thing.
Yeah, it makes a difference because people like to be humanized, and acknowledged for their humanness, no matter where they are in life. But anyway, so yeah, my first day we provided meals for the homeless, and it was a line of people. I'm not talking about 50 people. It was maybe 200, 300, 400 people, and I've never seen this in my life before. In South Carolina, you have homelessness, but it's not like that from what I've seen. And so in this line, you had people of many different background, ages, and some people was having mental health problems. It was, to me, it seemed chaotic because it was my first day. But to the other like counselors and stuff and the ministers, they was handling it pretty well. They knew how to take it. And one guy, he just passed out on the ground, started shaking and stuff. And I didn't know what to do. You know, so one of the other older gentlemen, he like, look, just back up, let him do what he has to do. He's gonna be all right. To me, I thought it was crazy. I was like, oh, he needs some help. But like he said, dude got back up. It was all right. But it was a lot going on out there. Some people was crying. Some people was angry because they was hungry. You know, and it was just a lot. But when I first saw that, I'm an observer. So I saw how some people were ashamed. You know, some people didn't care. Some people just wanted food and go. You know, but the need was the same. It was a dire need, and I could tell most people were just going through it. You know, and I had to learn how to first deal with them. Well, deal with that, seeing that, so I can, I can assist them. You know, but once you really start to get into the individual lives, you really start to see what they're dealing with and how they got to where they are at that moment in time in life.
Okay, so when you say that some people were dealing with mental illness, like what kinds of mental illness and what did you see as far as like symptoms? Because I know like for us in social work, especially if we see people that are homeless that are on the streets, we could recognize signs and symptoms, like if somebody's hallucinating or, hearing voices. And we all know that hallucinations are things that deal with your five senses. So you hear things, you see things, you taste things, you smell things that aren't there. So you might feel something crawling on your skin, and, it might feel like ants or something is on your skin. You might smell smells that are not there. Taste is probably one of those that doesn't happen as frequently, but that's another thing. And then, of course, hearing things that aren't there, hearing voices and that kind of thing. And so sometimes you can see people, a lot of times I've seen people who were actively psychotic doing like this with like around their head. And I don't know exactly what that means, like if they're hearing voices or trying to make voices stop. But like I've been in Atlanta before and seen like people who may or may not have been homeless. My assumption is that they were like actively psychotic, walking down the street, talking to posters on buildings and that kind of thing. So what, if any, signs or symptoms have you seen people display that may or may not have been signs of mental illness?
Some things like that, just talking out loud when nobody's around, walking in the middle of the street, maybe dancing in the middle of the street when there's traffic, coming up to your car, like banging on your window, asking for, not like panhandling, but more so panhandling on another level where somebody's is a little more, seeing a lot of things like that. I've seen a lot of things where people just sitting down weeping and crying, and you know that the way they dress, they appear to be very homeless and very out of it, but the most common thing I see in Atlanta is people yelling and like fussing at themselves or fussing at whoever, or you could hear a whole conversation as if they're talking to a family member. It sounds, you'll look around like, who's they're talking to? But they're having a whole conversation. They be very angry and upset. And I can tell that you got to be some type of mental illness or some type of trauma going on. On the train sometimes, like one day on the train, I was going from the furthest northest train station to the West End where I live, and that's a good bit of a travel. But anyway, one guy got on, was waiting on the train to come, and he was just quiet. He wasn't saying nothing. We all got on the train, and as soon as the door closed, he started yelling and like doing all kind of stuff. I mean, he didn't appear to be, nothing wrong with him before we was waiting. But as soon as the door closed, he just went into acting, and he was talking about war, he was talking about racism, he was talking about the government, and then he was pointing at people, like challenging people, and to me, I felt like he wanted an audience. You know, I felt like he went unacknowledged and things like that. I don't know, but just based on what I seen, that's what it seemed like to me. You know, so I seen a lot of just people yelling and things like that, symptoms.
So I think it's interesting that you say that because, like I said, we here are professional social workers that are trained to know we'll kind of have an idea of what's going on. So even though that you are in the ministry and you're not a social worker and you are like just as a regular person who doesn't know these things like the general public, like you said, you felt like he wanted an audience. You felt like that he was acting or whatever. But for us, we would see that. And you said that he started talking about, you said the government,
He's talking about the government, racism, the war,
that kind of thing. So that to us would probably signify that that's somebody with PTSD. And you said he was pointing at people and things like that. So that would signify that that's probably a person with PTSD that has experienced some trauma, who is actively psychotic. And so a lot of people, when they hear the word psychotic, they think, oh, this person is crazy. But we definitely always should never use the word crazy when describing someone, especially as professional social workers. So being in an active state of psychosis is what psychotic is. So when you hear me say that somebody's psychotic, they're hearing things, they're seeing things, they're hallucinating basically. Delusions, and I always like to distinguish between hallucinations and delusions. So as I said before, hallucinations are things that deal with your five senses. And delusions are things that could be true, but probably are not. So somebody is being delusional if they say, oh, well, I'm gonna go jump out the window and start flying. You could jump out the window. You might not be flying up. You're gonna be flying down. But you know, it's something that can. Or let me just give a better example. Somebody who's actively delusional might say, you know, that they are going to meet Michael Jackson at his grave, or, you know, something that could actually, if he were alive, something that could actually happen, but it's probably not true. Or I saw President Barack Obama walking down this dark alley at 5:00 in the morning. Could happen. Probably didn't, but it could happen.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Then you have delusions of grandeur, which is like delusions on a whole higher scale, like saying that, you know, I'm Jesus Christ. Like, I'm here to come and save everybody. Like, those are like those huge delusions where, okay, you could be, probably not.
Right.
Definitely, probably not. But that's somebody who is probably actively psychotic too. You know, they're very delusional. Hallucinating again is, you know, hearing voices, having a conversation with themselves. That's definitely a hallucination. So we would look and be like, wow, you know, this person is actively psychotic. You as a general public person who hasn't been trained is like, oh, this person's seeking attention. They are acting, or they want an audience. But, you know, and that could be true. But more than likely, you know, especially when you talk about the government, like what kinds of things were they saying about the government?
Man, this guy, he was going in, man. He was just talking about how government, you know, is not fair to people, how they try to treat people, how they try to treat black people, just how they don't love their citizens and things like that. You know, he really was going in. And what made everybody feel awkward, just in this setting, it was mostly black people on the train, and it was just like one white family. It was kind of funny, and I really felt bad for them because everybody else was like, yo, don't come over here with that.
Yeah.
You know, and he was kind of pointing them out like, yo, like they're a problem. And other people were like, yo, chill, man. You know, because I really did feel bad for them because they were trying to go to the airport.
Right. Yeah.
And I could see it in their face. They was like, Lord, why we get on this train today? You know. And it was kind of, I mean, it's not funny, but it was kind of funny because, I mean, we knew nothing was going to happen to them. I mean, we didn't know, but, you know, we knew he was just, you know, having an episode, but it's still in conflict. You got a family, you just trying to get to the airport, you don't know, you know, I don't think you know this dude is, whatever he going through is directed at you. So in your mind, it's the scariest thing in the world. You got your little girl, your little boy. So that's why most people was trying to like get him to relax. But yeah, he was talking about the government like that, and they, in my opinion, were an extension of the government. You know, and it was a lot he was saying. It was going real deep in things that it take more than a train ride to discuss. You know what I'm saying? You wasn't gonna get those things situated in a train ride. You know, it just wasn't gonna happen.
So was he talking about the government and the war and pointing all of this in one conversation, or was that separate?
It was in one conversation.
Okay, so and that the reason I asked that is because if he were only talking about the government, then he probably just has a strong opinion about the government. But if he's talking about the government and the war, and he's having a conversation with himself, and he's doing all of these things combined, then it still could be that he just has a strong opinion about the government, but it also could be paranoia, especially if he's talking about like conspiracy theories and, you know, things like, oh, the government is out for black people and that kind of thing, because that to me is a sign of paranoia. It'd be interesting to know if he was diagnosed with anything. Potentially, I would think maybe schizophrenia, maybe PTSD, like I said, if he's talking about the war and pointing things out. Of course, we can never diagnose anybody without doing an actual assessment in office. So we could see people out and about displaying symptoms and things like that, but we should never diagnose anybody without having them come in office and do an assessment and use the DSM-5 for diagnosis. So it's neat, unfortunately, to see these things in real life and kind of think about what you might potentially think this person has or has been diagnosed with or labeled with, as I like to say, because a lot of these are just labels, and these are still people who have problems and who have been through things and experienced trauma and that kind of thing. And so I don't really like the whole label thing, but it's a person who just experienced trauma and who probably hasn't gotten treatment for it. So now let's talk about what your role is as a person of the cloth when it comes to you know, working with the homeless, or, you know, people who aren't actively psychotic or actively experiencing any symptoms or trauma, experiencing any symptoms. Like, so what would a person come to you for as far as counseling? And we know that for us as social workers, counseling for us is a whole lot different than counseling for somebody that's in ministry. Probably not a whole lot different, but we work from a knowledge base of diagnoses and things that we can point out, signs that we can point out and assign a label to using the DSM-5. So and I think, of course, some social workers are also ordained and also in ministry as well. So it goes hand in hand, and that's good. But some of us are just straight up social workers. So to have you here and talk about the spiritual aspect of it, and you know, some people, and this is why we should be culturally aware, not culturally competent. We've been taught to say culturally competent, but here recently they changed it to culturally aware, because we can never be culturally competent in anybody's culture. That would be like saying that you are competent, you're completely knowledgeable about somebody's culture, but we can never be. Like, we can only be aware of things in somebody's culture, and we would never fully understand it. So we kind of are changing or moving away from the word competent to culturally aware. So kind of forgot where I was going with that.
that's my role.
Yeah, so your role as far as like what a person would come to you for, and if they were, that's what I was gonna say, as far as like, some people really want their therapist to be spiritually or religiously based, like they really want to have that aspect and not just have therapy alone. So how do you, and tell us your credentials again?
Ordained Reverend, spiritual counselor.
Okay.
Somebody will come to me, well...
You have a master's in divinity?
Yeah, master's in divinity and theology and counseling. Okay. And so our training, we do go through a lot of, as far as counseling, we do go through a lot of the training as far as like somewhat social workers do. We go through all of it, but to be licensed and stuff like that, you have to go to the next level to do that. So we don't, before we counsel anybody, we tell them that we're not here to diagnose anything. We're here for spiritual counseling. And if you've been in any type of church or anything like that, you know that people go to like the ministers and stuff like this with every type of problem, you know, that they have. So they will come for a certain type of spiritual counseling. They may want like self-help in life, so on and so forth. You know, we have to go to, like I said before, we'll go to different homeless shelters. We go to children's home, prisons, anything, you know, but you have to have a specific training to do it, you know, and so they will come to me for things like that, but we don't diagnose people. And most people that come to us, they already know who we are. You know, they know we come from a spiritual perspective, and that's what they're seeking in most cases. And sometimes, well, most of the time, we do get people that have problems and issues way beyond what we can, I guess you say medically diagnosed. That word, yeah, medically diagnosed. Even though we may know, you can't do it, you know, for obvious reasons. And so we have to then refer them to the people who can diagnose. That's basically a good portion of what we do. I have a lot of people came to me about different problems and this and that, and I knew just from my training that okay, this may be that. And I was like, you know, you may want to seek a therapist, or I know somebody who works with this, and this. You know, I can give you their number if you would like, and you can talk to them to see if they can help you and things like that. But most of the time, they be seeking a deep spiritual cleansing, spiritual help, mental help, and things like that. So we really try to do that. And I've seen a lot of stuff with it, a whole lot of stuff. You know, sometimes, you know, I haven't cried, but it makes you want to break down and cry. You know what I'm saying? Because it's a lot. One thing in particular, I seen, we was doing this 1,000 men march in Atlanta, and the purpose was just to get 1,000 men to go through the city of Atlanta, the hardest hit communities, and, you know, just give different words of inspiration, give them different pamphlets and stuff like that, and try to get them to come to meetings and stuff so we can just improve the conditions of men in the city of Atlanta. We get them jobs, fatherhood, you name it. And we have professionals ready to help. And so we was doing that, and we met a lot of brothers on the street. There's one guy in particular, I guess you could say he was you know, a street guy, and he was angry. You know what I'm saying? He was angry and upset, and he was like, man, I ain't got no hope. I don't have this, I don't have that, you know. And so we didn't know how to handle him, right? Because he was a big dude, you know, he was from the street, you know. But we had a brother with us who was a professional, but he was also from the street. And he recognized exactly what the brother's going through. So he talked to him fight for fight. If you didn't know, you would have thought they was going to fight, you know. But in the end of it, the guy, he ended up like breaking down and crying. He's like, man, I appreciate y'all being out here. And, you know, it's things like that. But his problem was, you know, he had lost his kids. You know, he couldn't find a job. And they put him on medicine because these things traumatized him. He was having mental problems. He was seeing things. He was saying things. But he know that it isn't him. And because of that, he just couldn't get a leg up. You know, he was broken down, you know. And so by the men coming through and giving him his manhood, so to speak, you know, he felt like a man again, you know. And he felt like he can do it. He felt like he can work. And, you know, they've been working for a while. He eventually got out of that mindset and things like that. So that's some of what people come to us for and things like that.
Okay. So one thing that you said was that y'all had this big guy, and he was kind of, I guess, intimidating, but then y'all had another person who was there who kind of like matched his energy, I guess. Yeah. So for us in social work, we call that meeting people where they are. And so
that's exactly what it was.
Yeah. So it's like, you know, and I always say, like, you know, a lot of times some of our patients, I keep saying patients because I'm used to working in the hospital now, but some of our clients are, some may or may not be educated, and some who are not educated, we have to meet them where they are and not use like certain jargon. So you don't want to be spouting out all these big words and stuff like that, and then they're going to look at you like, and some people will tell you like what that mean, like why you using big words. They'll say stuff like that, like, and
bring it back.
Yeah, you have to know like when you have to be able to discern when to use.
There we go. You know, so you go hand in hand.
When to use certain language and when to be professional and by the book, like especially when you're working with like kids. Kids know when you're being fake. Kids know when you are just like, you know, you have to meet kids where they are, teenagers especially. So like if I'm working with a teenager, I'm going to approach them a whole lot differently than I would working with an adult, or I'm going to approach a young adult differently than I would working with the elderly, because with the elderly, I'm going to be a whole lot more respectful. Not that I would be disrespectful to somebody younger, but, you know, definitely be more respectful. If somebody that's around my age, today's my birthday, I'm 34.
Oh yeah, happy birthday, you know.
Somebody around my age, you know, even though you have to make sure that you're not being friends with the person, but that you also are relatable to that person. So if it's someone around my age, I have to still set that boundary to where I'm the professional and you are the client, but we can still have, you know, a friendly conversation, but we're not friends. And then also when you're working with younger kids or teenagers, you approach them differently. You meet people where they are. So also, like, if I know somebody if I'm working with a client who is like from a situation that was similar to what I experienced in my upbringing, then I could change and, you know, you adapt to different people. Or if I'm talking to a professional who's also a social worker, then I can adapt to that. So you have to be adaptable as a social worker. You have to be flexible. You have to code switch sometimes and all of that kind of stuff. Now, I also wanted to ask you about, in certain communities, there is, especially the Black community, there is the whole notion of, you know, we're gonna pray this away. Like, I don't need medication. Yeah. I don't need therapy. What goes on in this house stays in this house. That kind of thing. And it's not just Black communities, but it's, you know, most notably Black communities, because that's a cultural thing in the Black community, as most people say. But as a social worker doing this for over 10 years, I've seen it also in some white households as well, working with white clients and Hispanic. So I think it's really just across the board. I think it's just more of a stereotype, or it's more like a thing as far as the Black home goes, but it goes across all households. So, you know, I've had a patient's mom who said that she bought her 12 Bibles and she put one under her pillow, and the kid was actively like very depressed. You could see it, like she was slumped over, no eye contact, very fidgety, all of those things that very flat affect and things like that. So her mom was like, oh, we're going to go to church and everything's going to be better. I bought her 12 Bibles. I put one under her pillow. And, you know, and I always say to that, you know, it's great that you're going to church and you're going to pray and you're going to depend on God to help you through. But in addition to that, you also need to get this child help. And she eventually did get her help. And she got a lot better because she had a chemical imbalance. And so she had to have medication. And once she got on the medication, she got better. But so what do you say as far as like therapy versus counseling, or versus, you know, going to church and praying and things like that as a form of treatment for people with mental illness?
Well, I would say it goes hand in hand. But you can't, in my opinion, me being in ministry, you can't just do that alone. You know, I think for our community, Black community, when it comes to like spirituality and praying and faith and things like that, I think sometimes we may have taken it too far as like God will handle it all, everything's gonna be all right, without backing it up with, you know, concrete solutions. You know, it's starting to getting better now, but for a very long time, that's how it was. Just pray it away, you're just gonna believe. And that's just, in my opinion, that's not what God intended. But I talk to a lot of people, I go into a lot of homes, you know, and that's the case. You know, we just gonna pray it away. I don't want nothing, I don't want about to say nothing. And so you have to be careful how you address them with that, because you want to be careful to not unintentionally attack someone's faith, because that may be the only thing that they have. And if that's broken, it has to be replaced with something. So if they believing on that, you have to let them do it. However, you have to provide education. I would tell them, and I have told people like, yo, you know, they say faith without works is dead. You know, that's a very common thing we hear. You have to let them know, like, you have to put action to what you believe. God requires you to also put the work in, not just pray, but put the work in. I give them different examples in the Bible. If that's the case, I give them different examples in the Bible where they prayed and they worked. And, like Frederick Douglass said, he said, I prayed for 20 years, but I didn't see a result until I prayed with my legs, meaning faith without words. He didn't see a result to what you're praying for until he got up and did something about it. And one of my favorite quotes is, and I tell people this, one of my favorite quotes is, pray to God, but row towards the shore. Basically meaning if you out there lost, I'm like, God, I want you to get me back to shore, and I'm just sitting out here. You start moving, and God gonna bless your actions. God gonna see your faith. That's how you make it work. But you have to convince them of that, because it's a very, very big problem sometimes, especially when it comes to people having mental health problems, or they have medical problems. They don't want to. A lot of times they don't want to do that, and I get it. But you have to somehow you have to convince them little by little that you're gonna need this. I know God's gonna heal you, but God put this stuff here for you. You gotta believe God. You've been praying for an answer. Your answer is here. And things like that. So you have to kind of, like you said, meet them where they are. You have to kind of talk to them like that. And now it's hard, especially with older people. And it's hard. You have to convince them, not necessarily convince, but you have to just kind of show them in a different way. Like, hey, this can assist you in what you believe. Now I ain't trying to take nothing from you. I ain't trying to take your Jesus. You know what I'm saying? I'm just trying to assist you. Maybe God sent me here to help you. This is why I'm here. Maybe your answer is here. You have to talk to them in the language that they understand. So that's what I've seen. But it is a problem.
Okay. And I do like that, because like some people probably would think that you are trying to take away what they hold dear to them, what they see as their strength and what they've been raised with. So I do think it's important, like you said, to note that we're not trying to tell you not to pray or not to, go to church and that kind of thing. But like you said, for us in social work, we call it psychoeducation, and just giving them like, okay, yes, do that. But in addition to that, here's some information for you that you need to look over to decide if therapy or even medication could potentially be for you. And also, as social workers, we're all about self-determination. So we're not going to make somebody do something. We're just giving them the information so that they can make an informed decision on what they want to do. But we always put it back on them, because we want our clients to be autonomous. So the very last thing, because I don't want to go on and on and on. So in social work as well, we always have to make sure that we don't put our own beliefs onto people. Like, we have to be very open to everybody. If you don't believe in certain lifestyles and things like that, you still have to be able to work with people who don't necessarily see things the way that you see, as far as relationships or spirituality or race and different kind of things like that. As social workers, we might work with someone who's racist. We might work with someone who's sexist. We might work with murderers. We might work with rapists. We might work with just everybody, people who may have a different different sexual orientation or preference, or someone who is on the LGBTQ, I guess it's a spectrum. And some people don't agree with those lifestyles or those decisions and things like that, but we have to be prepared to work with everybody. Yes. And I know it's the same thing in ministry, but what I want to ask you is, so as far as spirituality goes, like I said, we have to be very well-rounded. So as far as ministry, do you have to, how do I want to word this? So like, okay, say you're a Christian, but then you have a person that's of another faith and they're coming to you. Like, do you have to be knowledgeable about different religions as well? Is that something that y'all had to go through when you were in grad school at ITC?
Very much so. Mm-hmm. We had to be knowledgeable of almost every religion, spiritual system, as much as possible, because if you're not, then, it's very hard for you to, you're looking at the world from one prism, and you have to be knowledgeable of other systems and stuff like that, because that's where we live in. And just say, like, when things happen, like 9/11, something like that happened, different faiths come together. People had a different belief, and they praying, and they offering up. You have to know what's going on. You can't be out there, pointing the finger, because they're not doing what you're doing, And yeah, I do get a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds and faith in particular, that talk to me about stuff. And I don't talk to like atheists, I don't talk to, people, Muslims, Buddhists, everything, And I think a lot of it comes off as, if they kind of know you, they know what you're about. And even if y'all two faiths don't mesh up, the ideologies are different, you as a person, they can respect your word, because they know you come from a good place, and they know even when you talk to them, you're not talking from an attacking or superiority, situation. I've talked to different couples. I talked to I've had people like LGBT people call me about their relationships, and it's kind of funny, because they'll always be like, look, I know you're a preacher, man, and I'm gay, but listen, man, I gotta ask you a question. You know what I'm saying? And I talk to them. I can respect that, because that means that they know I'm not attacking them.
Right.
They respect me and I respect them. They just want an opinion, and it's always funny. We end up laughing about it. Like, I just want to know, man. Look, this is the problem. Me and so and so. Like, I'm gonna leave out the graphic details. It just be funny. It really be funny. But to me, it's respect to me, because it's love. Like, I respect people coming at me like that, because that means I'm not putting out anything negative, you know what I'm saying? And they feel comfortable. But yes, you definitely have to be well-rounded in a lot of things, because it's a quote. I forgot who said the quote. But it says, when preaching or when speaking, as far as like spiritually, you need to preach with the Bible in one hand and a newspaper in the other. Meaning, you need to be well-rounded. You can't just look at the Bible and say, this is what we're going to do, this is what it is, because that's not the reality of the world. It's just not. I know from Christian people, I know we want it to be like that, but it's just not like that. And that's just the truth. So you have to be knowledgeable and respectful of what's going on. You know what I'm saying? Talk to your people about what y'all going to do, but also live, in the world with everybody else and make this thing happen, because, when you are like a preacher or something like that, you are leading, people do look to you, And last thing, one thing that makes me nervous sometimes, especially when I like preach, if the message is like real good, I would get people come to me like after the service, you know what I'm saying, and they really be like looking to me for answers. It's like a weight. I be realizing the weight and the duty. Like, you people really listen to what I'm saying. I know they are, but they really be serious about what they're going through, and that's a heavy feeling. It's almost like you have the antidote or something like that. You know what I'm saying? You have the answer, and they're looking to you. So you have to be on your P's and Q's and stuff like that. And so it's a very heavy feeling, but it's a very serious thing. Because when they come to you, just like, that's why I appreciate the social workers, because we go into a lot of homes and stuff, like, as if we are social workers, and we go to a lot of homes, a lot of situations, and I be looking like, wow, this is a lot going on, this is going down, but I stay in my lane. I know I'm coming in, representing spiritual counseling, bringing, peace as much as possible to a situation, helping people be a little inspired, helping people get their mind together just enough to seek out the help, to seek out the social worker or the this and that, because sometimes they're not even there to do it, in their mindset.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we try to make these videos about 40 minutes or less, and we're at 39 minutes. 39. So, yeah. Thank you for coming and chatting with us. Is there anything else you want to say? If you want to leave them your information, if they want to reach out to you.
Well, I appreciate it, man. This is a good channel. Y'all follow your boy, all platforms. JWhitfieldInspires, Instagram, YouTube, and I'm on there talking about stuff. So get at me.
All right.
There it is.
So until next time, see you later.
Yeah, appreciate you.